What happens when a goaltender goes from franchise savior to trade bait in the span of 2 seasons? When do you take a chance on a struggling netminder and hope a change of scenery unlocks his potential? And when does buying low become throwing good money after bad? Welcome back, folks. It's Thursday, January 15th, 2026, and we got a goaltending rumor that's going to make Habs fans either excited or deeply concerned, depending on how you look at it. According to David Pagnotta at the fourth period, the Montreal Canadiens are closely monitoring the situation of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in Buffalo. The Sabres have a goaltending logjam, and UPL has become the odd man out. But should Kent Hughes actually pull the trigger on this deal? Let's start with Buffalo's situation, because it's an absolute mess. They've got 3 goaltenders on a roster right now, and that's simply not sustainable. Kevin Adams, the Sabres GM, is going to have to make at least one move, probably 2, to clear up this logjam. With Alex Lyon and Colton Ellis also in the mix, and Devin Levi waiting in the wings as the future, Luukkonen has become the luxury asset that needs to be moved. And according to the report, Montreal is monitoring the situation closely, not just casually checking in, but actively tracking how this plays out. That suggests there's genuine interest from Ken Hughes. Now let's talk about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen himself, because evaluating him is incredibly complicated. 2 years ago, he looked like a franchise goaltender in the making. He posted a .910 save percentage, earned himself a fat contract extension, and looked like he was going to be Buffalo's answer in net for the next decade. Fast forward to today, and the story is completely different. Injuries have limited him to just 8 games this season, and in those games, he's posted a brutal .899 save percentage. That's not just below average, that's legitimately bad. But here's where it gets even more concerning. The report states that over the last 2 seasons combined, his save percentage has dropped to 88.8%, and he's ranked among the worst active goaltenders in the league. That's not a small sample size problem. That's a 2-year trend of declining performance. So the question Kent Hughes has to ask himself is this: is Luukkonen a talented goaltender who's been let down by a terrible Buffalo team and just needs a fresh start? Or is he a player whose best days are behind him, and you're about to commit $4.75 million per year through 2029 to a goaltender who might never recapture his 2024 form? That's the gamble. That's the buy low opportunity that could either be brilliant or disastrous. Let's talk about the potential upside first, because there's a scenario where this makes sense for Montreal. If you believe that Luukkonen's struggles are primarily due to Buffalo's dysfunctional organization and terrible defense, then bringing him to Montreal could unlock the talent that earned him that contract extension in the first place. Montreal has a much better defensive structure than Buffalo. Martin St. Louis has the team playing responsible hockey in their own zone. The young defensemen are developing nicely. If you put Luukkonen behind a competent defense instead of the Swiss cheese that Buffalo runs out there every night, maybe he returns to that .910 save percentage form. And if that happens, if he becomes a legitimate starting goaltender again, you've just solved your goaltending situation for the next 3 years at a reasonable cap hit. That's huge value. But now let's talk about the downside, because it's significant. If Luukkonen continues to struggle, if that 88.8 save percentage over 2 seasons is the real player and not just a product of Buffalo's dysfunction, then you just committed nearly $5 million per year through 2029 to a backup quality goaltender. That's a massive problem. That's cap space you can't use elsewhere. That's a roster spot occupied by a player who's not contributing. And most importantly, that's a contract that becomes almost impossible to move because no other team is going to want to take on that money for a struggling goaltender. And here's what makes this decision even more complicated for Montreal. They've already got goaltending depth in the organization. Sam Montembeault is still here, though we know he's on the trade block. Caden Primo is in the system. And most importantly, Jacob Fowler is developing as the future franchise goaltender. So if you bring in Luukkonen on that contract, where does he fit? Is he the starter, pushing Fowler's development back? Is he the backup, which means you're paying nearly $5 million for a backup? Is he competing with Montembeault, which means you got two expensive goaltenders when you really only need one? The roster construction gets messy very quickly. Now, the report mentions that Edmonton is also interested in Luukkonen, and that's actually important context. The Oilers have been desperate for goaltending help for years. The Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard tandem hasn't been good enough, and everyone knows it. If Edmonton is in the bidding, that could drive up the price. Buffalo might be able to create a bidding war and get more assets than they would otherwise. But it could also work in Montreal's favor if Adams just wants to clear the salary and is willing to take whatever reasonable offer comes his way. The key question is, what would Buffalo want in return? If they're just looking to dump salary and clear roster space, maybe Montreal can get Luukkonen for a mid-round pick and a B-level prospect. At that price, it's worth the gamble. You're not giving up significant assets. And if it doesn't work out, you can try to move him later or just live with a contract for a few years. But if Buffalo wants a significant return, a high pick, or a top prospect, then this becomes much more questionable. You're giving up valuable assets for a goaltender who's been one of the worst in the league over the last 2 seasons. That's a tough sell. My gut tells me this is a situation where Kent Hughes should be very, very careful. Yes, buying low on talented players has worked for him before. Patrick Lane, Sean Monahan, even the Philip Danault trade. These were all buy low moves that made sense because the risk was manageable. But Luukkonen's contract runs through 2029. That's not a short-term gamble. That's a multi-year commitment to a player whose performance has been declining for 2 straight seasons. And with Jacob Fowler developing as a future and the team already having goaltending depth, it's not clear that Luukkonen is even necessary. Unless the price is incredibly low, like a 4th-round pick and a fringe prospect, I think Montreal should pass on this one. There are better ways to address goaltending. If they decide they need an upgrade, there are cheaper options available. And most importantly, they've got Fowler coming, which means any goaltending acquisition should be viewed as a bridge, not a long-term solution. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen might bounce back. He might rediscover his 2024 form and become a quality starter again. But the risk of that contract becoming an albatross is too high for a team that's still building towards sustained contention. What do you think, folks? Should Montreal take a chance on Luukkonen and hope a change of scenery brings back his best form? Or is this a declining goaltender with a bad contract that Hughes should avoid at all costs? What would you be willing to give up to acquire him? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button, because the goaltending carousel is spinning, and we're going to be tracking every move as teams try to solve their net mining situations before the trade deadline.